Hello, today we're going to talk about philosophy. Three philosophers, in fact, arguably three of the most influential in the modern period: Descartes, Spinoza, and Leibniz. I'm going to explain what the most interesting, unique, or important concept that they introduced. Descartes and his cogito shaped philosophy as we know it. Spinoza and his concept of emotions is drastically in opposition to everything that was held as the primary theory in his day, and most of the time before him, and Leibniz created one of the most interesting conceptions of the world that I've ever seen. Monads and determinism are incredible theories that deserve to be understood. So, what's going on in the cogito argument? Descartes started off at the beginning of his meditations with the goal of finding things that he can prove. So, his goal is to try and find out what can go in this box and to move to this side. He starts with stuff that he can be absolutely certain of and moves from there. He realizes that if there is a reason to doubt anything, then he has to remove judgment on that certain thing. Basically, if he can doubt it, he removes it from his mind. He starts with the example of the senses. Sometimes we see stuff that isn't there, sometimes we hear stuff that's not there, etc. So based on his earlier claim that we need to get rid of stuff we can't be absolutely sure of, we can't trust our senses, so we have to get rid of them. He then has the idea to further prove that our senses are lying and can't be trusted by offering a theory that we could be in a dream. In Descartes' dreams, he thinks, representing to myself the same things or sometimes even fewer probable things than do those who are insane in their waking moments, offering to us the proof that the world around us kind of looks like a dream and could possibly be a dream. He also has the idea that God could just be an evil demon trying to trick us, but that one's complicated and I'm not going to spend very much time on it. We need to get to the important part. After Descartes kicks out our senses because they lie, it's possible we're in a dream and our crazy demon God is trying to trick us, he ends up alone with his brain. Or, well, not his brain. Material existence is doubtable, so he's eliminated that at this point. So, where does he go from here? Here's the important part. Descartes knows that there's something we have that has the ability to think. If we have that thing that can think, so we know we have a thing that can think, so we know for a fact that we exist. Boom, Descartes has his first box done. But wait, what about the crazy demon God? Couldn't he be lying to Descartes and putting thoughts into his brain? This theory works even with that. If the crazy demon God exists, which nobody really believes he does, him putting ideas into our head is admitting that we have something that receives ideas. Therefore, if we have a thinking thing, or something that can accept ideas, then we exist. Something has to exist to receive information. When I first read this, I was really confused. Descartes isn't very good at explaining stuff. He, in my opinion, he rambles a lot and uses weird words and is not concise at all. After it was explained to me, I understood it and was convinced by it. For a while, I went around saying that the physical world didn't exist, until I thought about it more and decided it probably did. But that's a story for another time. The process by which Descartes goes through to reach his conclusion of I think, therefore I am is very convincing to me. I'm not a philosopher by any means, so I'm not quite on the level of being able to break apart stuff and point out flaws. If it makes sense on a basic level, I tend to side with it. Descartes makes a lot of sense. I don't agree with the majority of his other writings, but I'm a big fan of his cogito. He presents why he's going through this process, how he narrows everything down, and arrives at a good, convincing conclusion. So, the second philosopher we're going to talk about is Spinoza. The question we're going to try and answer is, what is the nature of emotions to him? Baruch Spinoza based a lot of stuff off Descartes' writings, mainly building off one of his ideas about God. Spinoza's God is everything around us and is us. He's beyond impersonal and personal. Spinoza believes that everything in the universe is an extension of God, giving everything thought and consciousness. The chair I'm sitting on has a consciousness. The rock outside has consciousness. God is basically synonymous with nature to Spinoza. I say all of this to build into my next point. What is the nature of emotions to Spinoza? Before he came around with his idea of God and emotions were believed to have no cognitive function. They were just expressions of what's going on inside of us. When Spinoza showed up, suddenly emotions are completely different, according to him. Before he introduced his idea of emotion, everyone based their conceptions of emotion on Plato and Socrates, and we know what they thought about emotion. Plato and Socrates both thought that emotion was one of the things keeping us from becoming enlightened, and emotions were one of the horses that needed to be kept in line by the driver of the chariot, which was reason. Spinoza disagreed with the earlier conceptions of emotion and that it's non-cognitive. He says that emotions are thoughts with cognitive function. Unlike Socrates and Plato, who want us to deny our emotions and rely only on reason to achieve enlightenment, Spinoza wants us to fully embrace our emotions and rely and believing they're the only way to be free. Mindfully controlling them. He doesn't think we should just be wild and easy to enrage or upset. Spinoza wants us to break down our emotions to their roots and their basic idea is finding out why we're flooded with these emotions. He wants us to have active emotions, not bitter, passive emotions. By passive emotions, he just means emotions that are caused by nature, and active emotions are stuff that we choose to do. So he wants us to break down our emotions and find the roots. So what does he want us to do after we find the root? He wants us to build them back up to make them active emotions. Remember, he believes that emotions are thoughts and are just as cognitive as any other thought. After we found the root, we need to begin to develop a set of virtues. Firstly, no matter what the emotion is, you need to cultivate it and to focus on helping other people, focusing mainly on cooperation. Secondly, you must know your passions and focus on them and improving them. And lastly, you need to cultivate your intellect, learning as much as you can. But how do we move up towards active emotions instead of the nasty passive emotions? You focus on cooperation, working on developing emotions that lead to cooperating with a society, which can lead to an understanding of nature and of God. So the third person and last person we're going to talk about is Leibniz, and we're going to talk about his idea of monads and just what they are. So he built off of Spinoza and Descartes to build his own idea of the world, God, and the universe. His idea of the universe is much different than both of theirs, though, focusing most on determinism. Determinism to Leibniz means that the past affects the future, essentially the butterfly effect. Basically, if Napoleon Bonaparte eats a sandwich on Monday, then that's the cause of me deciding to grow my hair. Basically, the past plus the laws of nature equals a unique future. Everything is affected by this. The hawk flying and Larry biting his finger are all determined before they were born. Everything that happens is caused by something before it. You can go back until the beginning of God and beginning of time and reach God. He's the original catalyst for everything starting. God essentially writes everything down that is ever going to happen, and that's what happens because he's a master of probability. So this brings us to monadology, the study of monads, something created by Leibniz. Monads are windowless, non-commutative, synchronized immaterial essences unfolding throughout time and mirroring the whole world. A good way to understand them is as spiritual atoms. Atoms are completely material, just like monads are completely immaterial. They are also unable to interact with the material world, but the material world is connected to the monads in a very intimate way. Everything that exists has a monad. They can't exist without each other. Monads need physical objects, and physical objects need monads. Here's where the deterministic worldview I talked about earlier fits in. Monads were ordained and created by God at the beginning of time. He organized them like matryoshka dolls. They break down into different things. The most basic type of monad is the particular monad that represents the feel of tree bark. Obviously, it's not that specific monad, it's the type of particular monad. They're based on perception. You perceive the tree bark on your hand, your monad is perceiving the monad of the tree. This is the monad so breaking down the monad to the more specific kind, we find the sensation type of monad. This is the monad that's a bear that's died. Monads can't die, the bear's monad will continue forever. Stuff will feed off the bear and carry along the bear's monad. After this type, there are the rational consciousness monads, which are us. We have the ability to rationalize and have the capabilities of all the other monads. The bear can't rationalize, but it can touch the tree, and the tree bark, all it can do is perceive. It can't rationalize or act. We can act, perceive, and rationalize. We have the most advanced form of monads. Now that you understand the basics of monadology, it's time to delve deeper into it. And here's where it gets weird. Remember how monads can't interact with the physical world at all? Kind of forget about that. It'll make sense in a sec. Monads are the only things that interact with each other. Well, they don't interact with each other, but they ride along next to each other super close. Like there's enough room for something to go in between them. Our bodies don't interact with anything. It's our monad interacting with other monads. Not really interacting, you know what I mean? In the non-material world. So don't start complaining about contradicting yet. Leibniz has an explanation. Monads can't exist without a material substance. Remember? The monad is so related to the physical object that it can't exist without it. It's like how atoms can touch atoms, and we really aren't touching stuff, it's our atoms touching our other atoms. So, that's the end of the speech. I hope that I helped explain the most important and crucial parts of the three philosophers' creations and visions of the world. Descartes and his cogito formed modern philosophy. Essentially, everything that has come after him has been building off of what he said, whether in disagreement or agreement. Spinoza has an incredible concept of God and emotions. It's super interesting and unique. His direct disagreement with Plato and Socrates is very important for philosophy. Not many philosophers contradict Plato and Socrates in their chariot concept. Leibniz and his monadology is a much disputed concept, with many people just hating it because it's complicated and hard to understand. But after spending time to understand it, it makes much more sense. I think that thinking of monads as spiritual or non-material atoms helps with the concept a lot. Thank you for listening to my speech.